The night before the storm came in from the west. It arrived the way April storms in Ohio sometimes do, without much warning and without much apology. Dana Kowalski heard it from inside the house. She heard the wind first, a low, steady pressure against the windows that built slowly, the way pressure does when it has nowhere else to go. Then the rain arrived, hard and sideways, tapping against the glass in long, irregular bursts. She checked the weather app on her phone. She already knew what it would say. She turned off the lamp in the living room. She went to bed, outside in the dark. And the wind, the walnut tree at the far edge of the backyard, was moving in ways it hadn't moved before. One of its larger branches was bending under the weight of the rain. It held for a while. Then it didn't. The sound it made when it fell was loud enough to enter her sleep. She didn't get up to check. By morning, she had no memory of hearing anything at all. The alarm went off at 7:15. Dana made coffee. She stood at the kitchen counter in the gray Ohio morning, holding the mug with both hands, looking at nothing in particular. She put on her shoes to take the recycling out before she sat down. She opened the back door. The yard was wet and very still. The fallen branch lay across the center of the grass, larger than she would have guessed, a clean break at the trunk where the wood had finally surrendered to the wind. She walked toward it without deciding to. Then she saw the nest. It had come down with the branch, a careful, compact construction of leaves and soft material built into the angle where the branch had met the trunk. It was in pieces now, scattered around the base of the tree. Beside what remained of the nest, lying on her side in the wet grass, was an adult female squirrel. She was small and completely still. The branch had come down in the night, and she had not survived it. Then she saw the second shape. It lay half a meter from the mother, half hidden under a wet leaf. It was the color of something that had not been in the world very long, a pale, translucent pink. It had no fur. Its eyes were sealed completely shut. Its ears were flat and close to its head. It was one of the most fragile things she had ever seen outside of a photograph. Its chest was moving, slowly, unevenly, but moving. Dana did not go back inside for her phone. She went back inside for a paper towel. The paper towel was the right instinct, even if she didn't know why yet. She would learn later that a newborn squirrel cannot regulate its own body temperature. Not at this stage, eyes still sealed, no fur to hold warmth. Nervous system still assembling itself in the dark. Dana crouched down with the paper towel. She knew only that her hands felt too warm, too variable, that something this small required a different kind of handling than anything she had held before. She folded the paper towel twice into a small square. She slid it under the squirrel in one slow, careful motion. The squirrel weighed almost nothing. She was perhaps 5 centimeters from nose to tail, shorter than Dana's index finger. Through the paper towel, Dana could feel a faint, rapid vibration that it took her a moment to identify. It was breathing. She carried her inside. The kitchen table became the command center within 10 minutes. Donna sat down with the squirrel cupped in the paper towel in one hand and her phone in the other. She typed, "Found baby squirrel, need help." She read quickly. Do not give water directly. Do not give cow's milk. Do not use a heating pad directly against the body. Keep it warm. Contact a wildlife rehabilitator immediately. She found the number for the nearest center and called. The woman who answered had a calm, practiced voice. Dana explained what she had found: the storm, the fallen branch, the mother, the surviving infant. The woman told her this was a pinky, the term used for squirrels in the first week of life, before the fur comes in and before the eyes open. Then she told Dana that the center was at capacity. There would be no space for at least 10 days. She told Dana she would walk her through what to do. Dana picked up the nearest thing she could write on a single paper towel from the roll on the counter, and she wrote down everything the woman said. The ink smeared slightly in one corner. Warmth was the first priority. Not comfort, not feeding, but warmth. Without it, nothing else would matter. The protocol was specific: a clean cotton sock filled with dry, long-grain rice, heated in the microwave in 30-second intervals, then tested against the inside of the wrist. Dana went through 4 attempts before she got it right. The first sock was too thick. The second was too hot. The third cooled within 8 minutes. The fourth was a thin athletic sock filled with rice. She heated it for 30 seconds. She pressed it to the inside of her wrist. It felt right. She placed it in the shoebox she had lined with a dish towel. She set the squirrel on top of it. She stood at the kitchen table and watched. Within 4 minutes, the squirrel's breathing began to settle into something more even. Not calm, but steadier. But Dana had a client call in 40 minutes, a report due by end of day. 3 emails she had been composing in her head since Monday. She did not move from the table. Getting the Pedialyte required a trip to 2 pharmacies and 1 pet supply store. She bought the pack of 10 syringes. She bought the Pedialyte and puppy milk replacer. She left the squirrel in the shoebox on the kitchen table. She reset the rice sock before she left. She was back in 22 minutes. This was the fastest Dana had driven anywhere in 2 years. The first feeding took longer than she expected. A 1 milliliter syringe holds very little less than a single teaspoon. The squirrel needed half of that, delivered 1 tiny drop at a time, angled carefully to the side of the mouth so that nothing went into the lungs. The lungs of a pinky squirrel are the size of a grain of rice. This is not a metaphor. This is the actual scale of what Donna was working with. She sat at the kitchen table with her elbows on the wood and both hands very still. And she administered the first feeding in careful, deliberate drops. The squirrel swallowed. Slowly, imprecisely, but she swallowed. Dana set the syringe down. She exhaled. She had not noticed she was holding her breath. The problem with the rice sock became clear by late afternoon. It cooled every 20 minutes. Every 20 minutes, Dana had to remove the squirrel from the shoebox, replace the sock heated, again test it against her wrist, and return the squirrel to it. She did this 11 times between noon and 6 in the evening. On the 12th time, she sat down with the sock in one hand and the squirrel in the other, and without making a deliberate decision about it, she tucked the squirrel into the front pocket of her hoodie. The pocket was deep and dark and lined with soft fleece. The squirrel settled into it without protest. Donna pressed her palm gently over the outside of the pocket. The breathing inside her pocket steadied within 3 minutes. She thought, "I am the warmest thing this animal has." By 9 o'clock, she had canceled the client call, sent an apologetic email about the report, and eaten a bowl of cereal standing at the kitchen counter because sitting down would have required removing the squirrel from her pocket. She had also named her. It happened somewhere around the 5th feeding when she was sitting in the kitchen in the quiet of the evening, watching the small creature in her palm work through half a milliliter of diluted Pedialyte. She looked like a hazel. Dana wrote it in small letters at the bottom of the paper towel with the rescue instructions, Hazel. Then she drew the syringe again and kept going. The night schedule was midnight, 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning. Dana set 3 alarms on her phone. She placed Hazel into the shoebox with the rice sock and she lay down on the sofa. She lasted 6 minutes. She could see the shoebox from the sofa. Then she got up and picked Hazel up and sat back down with her in her hoodie pocket and her phone in her hand and waited for midnight. At midnight, she fed her. She lay back against the arm of the sofa with one hand resting over the outside of the pocket, feeling the faint warmth of the body inside it. And she watched the ceiling. The house was completely quiet. At 2 in the morning, she woke before the alarm. She sat up in the dark, disoriented for a moment, and then remembered everything at once. She checked the pocket. Hazel was still breathing. She fed her in the kitchen, under the single light above the stove, the rest of the house dark around her. Half a milliliter. 2 minutes. The squirrel's mouth moved in small, urgent motions that Dana was beginning to recognize. She set the syringe down and sat for a while in the kitchen before going back to the sofa. Outside the window, the backyard was dark and still. She could see the outline of the walnut tree against the slightly lighter sky. At 4 in the morning, the alarm went off. She was already awake. She fed Hazel in the dark kitchen again. She changed the rice sock by reflex heat test replace. She held Hazel in her palm for a moment before returning her to the pocket. She was so small. The sheer improbability of it, that something this size was alive at all. That the machinery of a heart and lungs and a nervous system had been assembled into a package that fit inside a closed hand. She put Hazel back in the pocket. She made coffee. She watched the sky outside the kitchen window change from black to gray to the pale washed-out white of an Ohio morning after rain. She pulled the paper towel off the counter. She crossed off the first 3 lines of the feeding schedule. Day 1. Done. 9 more to go. She did not sleep after 4 in the morning. She sat in the kitchen while the light came up outside and did not try. The paper towel was on the counter with 3 lines crossed off. On the second day, Hazel ate less. Dana noticed it on the 3rd feeding of the morning. The swallowing was slower, less coordinated, and Hazel pulled away from the syringe after a 1/4 milliliter instead of the full half. Dana called the rehabilitation center. The same woman answered. She told Dana this was normal. Reduced feeding on day 2 was common, and not a sign that something had gone wrong. She told Dana to keep going. Dana wrote this down at the bottom of the paper towel. Day 2 ate less. Normal. She underlined the word normal. Then she underlined it again. On the 3rd day, Hazel ate well. More than well, she pulled at the syringe with a small, focused insistence that had not been there before. During the 2nd feeding of the morning, Hazel raised both of her front paws and pressed them against the side of the syringe. Not gripping, just contact. Just the small, specific pressure of 2 front paws, deciding that they had an opinion about the situation. Dana stopped. She did not pull the syringe away. She held it still and let Hazel keep her paws against it for as long as she wanted. This lasted about 40 seconds. Then Hazel finished eating, and Dana set the syringe down and sat at the kitchen table in the quiet of the morning and did not immediately move on to the next item on her list. The neighbor from next door came by in the afternoon with a casserole. The neighbor held Hazel briefly cupped in both palms, while Dana went to find a container for the casserole. When she came back, Hazel was moving restlessly, small continuous shifts pressing against the edges of the neighbor's hands. Dana picked her up. The movement stopped. That evening, she wrote in her phone, "Today she recognized my hands." She read it back twice before she put the phone down. The rice sock ritual changed over the first few days into something she did without thinking. Remove the sock. Take it to the microwave. 30 seconds. Carry it to the sink and press it to the inside of the wrist. Return it to the shoebox. On the 4th day, Dana cooked a real dinner for the first time in longer than she wanted to calculate. The feeding schedule at 6 o'clock meant she would be in the kitchen anyway, and she found herself standing at the counter with a pot of water on the stove and pasta in her hand. She ate at the table. She could not remember the last time she had eaten at the table. Not standing at the counter, not in front of the laptop, not from the bowl balanced on the arm of the sofa, but properly at the table with a plate and a fork and the kitchen light on. The shoebox was beside her plate. The house was quiet. She ate slowly. She had not realized how much of her life she had been conducting in a kind of ongoing transit. The feeding schedule had changed that without asking her permission. On the 5th day, Hazel's eyes began to open. Not completely, just the faintest separation at the center of each lid. A sliver of dark, unfocused light getting through for the first time. Dana was holding her for the morning feeding when it happened. She watched it without moving. Hazel's head tilted very slightly upward in the general direction of Dana's face. Dana sat very still and let herself be looked at by something that may or may not have been able to see her. She thought about the dog she and her ex-husband had talked about getting. Hazel closed her eyes again. Dana set her down gently, more gently than usual. The rhythm of the days settled into something she had not expected. There was the first feeding at 6 in the morning when the light outside was still gray. There were the moments in the afternoon when she would sit in the kitchen with Hazel in her palm and just be still. She had not been still for a very long time. She had been busy with the things that fill a house, when a house is only yours. The feeding schedule interrupted all of it every 2 hours without exception. Somewhere around day 5, she stopped experiencing it as a constraint. On the 6th day, she took a photograph. Hazel was feeding, both front paws pressed to the syringe, eyes half open now and pointed vaguely upward. Dana held the syringe steady with one hand and took the photo with the other. She looked at it for a while after. She could not think of anyone to send it to. She saved it to an album she did not have a name for and went back to the feeding. On the 7th day, Dana talked. She began to talk in sentences without deciding to, while Hazel fed in her palm. She talked about the walnut tree, about Hazel's mother, who had probably been using that tree for years. She talked about the report she had finally submitted. She talked about the wall in the living room she had been meaning to repaint. She talked about small things, ordinary things, the texture of an ordinary life. Hazel did not respond. She sat in Dana's palm and breathed. But the kitchen felt different when someone was talking in it. Less like a room, more like a place. On the 8th day, at 2 in the morning, after the midnight feeding, Dana picked up her phone. She lay on the sofa in the dark with Hazel in her hoodie pocket, and the phone screen casting a pale rectangle of light on the ceiling. She opened the browser. She typed Ohio pet squirrel legal. In Ohio, it is illegal to keep a wild squirrel as a pet without a licensed rehabilitator permit. Obtaining that permit requires 40 hours of supervised training. She closed the tab. She set the phone face down on her chest. She thought about why she had typed that. She thought about the conversation she'd had with herself 2 years ago when 3 people had suggested she get a pet. The real reason she had said no had been simpler and harder to say. She hadn't been sure she was capable of being what something needed. She had not been sure she had enough left over. Hazel had not asked for her opinion on any of this. Hazel had simply needed warmth and food on a schedule without exception, and Dana had provided it. Every 2 hours, for 8 days, without missing once. She pressed her hand over the outside of her pocket and felt the small warmth inside it. She did not open the search tab again. She lay there for another hour before she finally slept. On the 9th day, Dana called the rehabilitation center. They had space now. She could bring Hazel in the following morning. She confirmed the appointment. She wrote it on the paper towel at the very bottom below the feeding schedule and below the note about day 2. Tomorrow. That evening, she fed Hazel at 6, at 8, and at 10, and she was as careful as she had been on the first night. The temperature of the rice sock, the angle of the syringe, the amount of time she allowed after each feeding before she put her down. She was just being careful. On the morning of the 10th day, Dana got up before the alarm. She fed Hazel at 5:30. Hazel ate quickly now. The coordination was there, the small front paws steady against the syringe, the swallowing efficient and sure. She looked nothing like the thing Dana had found in the wet grass. She still had no fur to speak of, still had the soft, unfinished look of something not yet ready for the world on its own. But she was strong, visibly, undeniably strong in the grip of those small paws, in the speed of the feeding, in the way she turned her head toward Dana's palm. Dana held her for a while after the feeding was done, longer than usual. She did not examine why. She packed the bag carefully. The remaining Pedialyte, the puppy milk replacer, a clean sock and a bag of rice. The 1 milliliter syringes, she had 8 left from the pack of 10. She folded a small fleece cloth and put it in as well. Then she took out a clean sheet of paper from the printer and wrote the feeding notes in full. The times, the amounts, the progression from day 1 to day 10, the way the feeding volume had increased and the coordination had improved. She wrote that Hazel preferred the left hand to the right. She wrote that Hazel fed more slowly when there was background noise. She wrote that Hazel slept most deeply after the 2 in the morning feeding. She folded the paper twice and put it in the bag. Nobody had asked for this information. She provided it anyway. The rehabilitator arrived at 9. Her name was Marie, and she had the particular quality of someone who has done necessary, important work for a long time without needing anyone to acknowledge that it is important. She came in and set the carrier on the kitchen table and looked at the feeding notes Dana handed her. She looked at them carefully, page by page. She looked at Hazel. She told Dana she had done well. She told Dana that not everyone manages it, that a pinky squirrel has a survival rate under human care that drops significantly without the right temperature maintenance, and that making it 10 days without training was not a small thing. Dana nodded. She picked up Hazel from the shoebox one last time. Hazel was warm against her palm. Her front paws moved, testing the air. She turned her head slightly toward Dana's wrist, not seeing exactly, but sensing something familiar. Dana placed her carefully in the carrier. Hazel's paws found the fleece lining. She was still. Marie picked up the carrier. She walked toward the front door. Dana followed. She stood in the doorway while Marie carried Hazel down the front walk to the car. The morning was clear. The first fully clear morning in nearly 2 weeks. The sky above the oak trees on the street, a flat pale blue. Marie opened the car door. She turned back. She told Dana that when Hazel was old enough to be released, Dana could be there if she wanted. Dana said she would like that. Marie got into the car. Dana stood in the doorway. She watched the car back out of the driveway. She watched it move down the street and stop at the corner and turn left and disappear. She stayed in the doorway for a while after that, one hand on the doorframe looking at the empty street. The neighborhood was quiet, the school buses already gone, the working people already gone, just the sound of wind in the trees and a dog somewhere on the next block. She stepped back inside. She closed the door. The kitchen was exactly as it had been. The shoebox was still on the table. The rice sock was inside it. The paper towel with the feeding schedule was on the counter, covered in 10 days of small crossed-off lines, the ink smeared in one corner. She stood at the counter and looked at it. She picked it up. She smoothed it flat with the side of her hand. Then she picked up the sheet of printer paper, the detailed notes she had written this morning, the ones nobody had asked for. She folded it once and set it on top of the paper towel. She did not put either of them in the recycling. She left them on the counter. Outside the kitchen window, the walnut tree was there against the morning sky, its remaining branches still and ordinary in the clear April light. There was a space in the upper branches where the large branch had been. She had not noticed it before today. She noticed it now. She made a second cup of coffee. She sat down at the kitchen table, not at the counter, not standing up, but at the table the way she had started doing again over the past 10 days. She sat for a while. The house was quiet. It was the same quiet it had always been in the mornings since she had been living in it alone. But it was not quite the same house. The coffee cooled. She drank it anyway. She thought about the weeks ahead and about a morning in May or June when she would drive to a place she had never been and watch something she had kept alive return to the world it was built for. She thought it would be a good morning. She thought she would bring coffee. She got up from the table, rinsed the mug, and opened her laptop. She had a report to finish. She started writing.